Hey Neil, thanks for having me. It's been a really exciting weekend, and thank you again so much for just helping steer the ship, dude. I know it
Thank you,
takes a lot
brother.
of work, and we're almost there. We're at like the finish line. So, and I think again, this interview with Kosta is going to be really appropriate to really just take a lot of things that we've been talking about with like just like the knowing that there are these other civilizations, galactic, historical, and then to be able to really bring it into the practical, where we focus on developing the relationship, and that's where we start talking about the CE5, the human initiated peaceful contact with our ET relatives. So I'm excited to be able to have Kosta and Hollis here as well. So Neil, thank you again. And
Thank
if
you,
there's
brother.
anything else, I think we'll probably just kind of segue right into it.
Go for it. Hey, Kosta, Hollis.
Kosta, thank you so much for joining. And Hollis, is it Hollis? Hollis? Beautiful. Thank you. And feel free to unmute your microphones just so we can make sure that we can hear you loud and clear. And I'm glad that you were able to make it in on time. And here we are. And we'll just make sure everything's good. There we go. Perfect. Wonderful, wonderful. I'll just do a very, very brief introduction, and then we'll just pass it over to you. So again, Kosta Makreas and Hollis, again, who are here with us today, they are part of ETLetsTalk.com, which is a global community, if not one of the largest communities, that has been bringing people together to be able to help encourage them and educate them about CE5, which again is human-initiated peaceful contact with our ET relatives. And they're also involved with the People's Disclosure Movement. And again, Kosta, I know I'm still fairly new to some of your work, which is really, really exciting for me, because once I started exploring it, I'm like, oh my, it reminded me of myself, where I'm just like, you know, if I could have seen myself doing exactly what you were doing just another generation earlier, and really finding that passion to be able to say like, wow, this is really important. And then to be able to give people the wisdom and the tools to be able to say, you can do this too, and we can do this. How do we, again, kind of begin developing this relationship further with our ET relatives, and knowing that I'll just say this, that, you know, there's a lot that we can learn from them, but there's a lot that they're learning from us too. So Kosta, I'll pass it over to you, and please feel free to tell us a little bit about ETLetsTalk.com, the People's Disclosure Movement, and then from there we'll just kind of flow into conversation. And welcome again, and we'll post the links for ETLetsTalk.com into the chat as well. So Kosta and Hollis, thank you so much, and go right ahead.
Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, and I'm Hollis.
Yeah. Although I like Hollis.
I was trying too hard there. I was trying way too. There we go. Hollis is fine. So.
Actually, and you know what? You say you see yourself in me, or myself in you. I forgot how you phrased that. And you know, that is you're very much online with that. We even look alike. I mean, look at the resemblance, you and I. It's uncanny, isn't it? Most likely brothers from another mother. But anyway, I want to say thank you to Neil and to yourself, and for the opportunity for us to talk about ETLetsTalk.com, the People's Disclosure Movement, and the People's Love Alliance. We have a lot to say, and I'm the founder of ETLetsTalk.com and the People's Disclosure Movement, though not the founder of People's Love Alliance, but I'm trying to promote it. And some of you may know me, but this is me, Kosta Makreas, and
I'm Hollis Polk.
And
yeah. Okay,
her specialty.
So I'm a volunteer with ET Let's Talk, and I teach people how to use their own innate psychic abilities to contact our star brothers and sisters.
And that's something very fundamental that is at the core, like you mentioned, Brendan, the CE5, using consciousness to make this contact. The point is, there are many modalities that people like Ray Hernandez and his team have identified that we can use to make this contact. And we've run the gamut of all of those, I think, in our community over the years. But what I want to give your audience is like a high-level view of why we're here and what we're going to talk about, and then drill down a little bit more to let you know all how we got to this place. I like to say that everybody that I've contacted in this community for the last 14 years while building the community has a story. And I love hearing stories from people, because no two are alike. And I think that for those of you out there who don't know who we are, some of you do, and I want to welcome the ET Let's Talk community people here. But those of you seeing us for the first time might wonder, how did we get to having an online community of, in ET Let's Talk's case, 150,000 people in more than 100 countries, making contact. Well, it didn't happen overnight, and we're still working on it, right? And we'll continue to do that because it's a mission of the heart, and one that's designed to create a wonderful future with the cosmic beings that are here, as well as with each other. So having said all that, the two major things I'm going to talk about with Hollis are the People's Disclosure Movement and the People's Love Alliance. And what I'll say at this point is these two things, these two movements are two sides of the same coin. In the People's Disclosure Movement, we are teaching others across the planet, and have been for years, to make contact with our cosmic families, because they have told us that they are family. And that's all well and wonderful, and we have thousands of successful points of contact, videos, pictures, and like I said, a growing community of people making their own contact. But it's not just about the lights in the sky. It's also the People's Love Alliance, which is the love on the ground, human beings learning how to get along with each other, because the cosmic beings have probably gone through the phase we're going through right now, where we might destroy our planet, or we might make the next spiritual evolutionary leap into just some great cosmic humanity with them. And that's where we want to head. That's what we're all about. But the thing is, we humans have to learn to get along. And the Love Alliance, I'll give some examples of why I'm a cautious, enthusiastic optimist that we will conquer the worst parts of our nature and elevate the spiritual, wonderful parts as human beings, get along and present ourselves as worthy, I think, of joining cosmic society. I think our cosmic friends are waiting for that, and also willing to help us and mentor us in that. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add any words.
They have taught me how to, shall we say, encourage groups to share energy to make a bigger field, to make the contact better.
What's that called? You have a
well, toroidal? I have a name. Yeah, it's the toroidal energy field, but
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's just one of the methods.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know, that CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, is human initiated, as Brendan was saying, interactive contact. And that's what the power of it is. But before we get into more about the People's Disclosure Movement, Hollis and I would like to tell you our stories of how we got here.
Yeah, everybody's got a story.
Everybody's got a story, Ori. And to quote Rod Stewart, yeah. Myself, briefly came from the Midwest of the United States. I was born in the 50s, but really came of age in the 60s and 70s in this country. I was someone interested in astronomy with a telescope, interested in science fiction, and interested in what was then the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, which captivated the world at that time. Regardless of what many of you may think about NASA, it was the thing back then, and captivated the world, like I said. And I was no different than many people who had their eyes on the skies and were just thrilled that human beings were heading into space. Well, at about age 10, I think, I discovered my first UFO book, written by one of the contactees of the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s movement that preceded what we're doing. And I was just smitten. It had the pictures of the traditional dome-shaped craft in it. And I just looked at that, and I just wanted to be in one. I wanted to meet those that are there. And I just knew that this was the universal part of myself and everyone that was here on Earth visiting. Back then, you couldn't talk about it a lot. They would lock you up, call you crazy, lose your job, etc. But I was a young person, and like I said, I was smitten. Fast forward to 2006, many years later, after I lived a pretty much conventional life. I went to university, got a degree in computer science and a minor in mathematics. I became a software independent contractor and engineer, and spent my time in Silicon Valley doing a lot of left brain software kind of things, and really enjoying it. But my life changed in 2006 when I discovered a group of people in Northern California that were using consciousness, CE5, to go out under the stars and make contact. I wanted to do that. I talked to Hollis about it and said, hey, they're going out for a week. Why don't we drive up there? We're in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's a 4.5 hour drive. Join me for a week. This is kind of cool. And she said to me,
I totally support you. We had seen video of a lot of military people who all were sharing their experiences with craft that could not be, earthly craft. And so I was convinced this was real. And I should probably back up and say, I'm a little younger than Kosta, but as a very, very small child, I was fascinated by the space program. I had scrapbooks of NASA stuff. I remember hearing John Glenn's first, flight on the radio, because there wasn't TV, or at least we didn't have TV. But I remember being, just captivated by it. But I was so not into science fiction. Didn't interest me in the least. Never watched a Star Trek. Fell asleep during Star Wars. I'm just not interested. My dad did give me Chariots of the Gods when I was 10. And, that was fairly persuasive. Like, okay, these star civilizations have been around and they've been here, cool. But again, didn't change anything in my life. So anyway, so when Kosta said, hey, I want to go up to Mount Shasta, let's go. I went, yeah, well, that's nice. I believe you. I believe it's real. But hey, man, I got a business to run. So, because I've been self-employed basically my entire life, and no, it's not important enough to me to take a week off and go there, but go have a good time.
And I did. So she had said that it's not personal to her in any way, and
Right.
and I accepted that. So I went for the week, and every night we were learning how to make contact, and we were in fact seeing zigzagging craft, flash bulbs, we call them. We were seeing orbs, all kinds of things that showed to me that this was a successful thing, this approach of consciousness, especially with a group, although you can do it alone, to make interactive contact. I would call Hollis every morning, who was back home, and talk to her about what I'd seen the night before out in the field there in a very excited way. Along about the fourth morning, she stopped me just as she picked up the phone, and I wanted to get started on, hey, look, listen what happened Wednesday night last night. And she said to me, wait a minute, I've got something to tell you.
I've got a story for you.
And I thought, what could be more exciting than what I saw? Well, it was.
Okay. So, and I should explain that I'm clairvoyant, I'm clairaudient, and I'm a telepath. And I have had those abilities since I was a small child, even though they were, shall we say, discouraged. And I talked to a lot of adults even today who remember how discouraged they were. But anyway, I've had these abilities, and then I trained them as a young adult. So we'll start with that. But so Kosta's out of town. I read before I go to bed. So I'm sitting in bed reading. Don't remember what I was reading, probably a trashy novel. So I'm sitting in bed reading, I'm tired. Okay, so, put the bookmark in the book, close it up, put it over on the nightstand, turn out the light. And I'm sitting up in bed because I'm reading. Turn out the light. And as I turn around to face the foot of the bed before I scooch down, now it's completely dark. Now, I should also say I have very, very good night vision. Like my eyes see very well in the dark. In fact, I don't like bright light. Even we have a little ring light, that's annoying. And it's broad daylight. Anyway, so I turn around and I'm looking at the foot of the bed, and there are 4 or maybe 5 little beings standing around the foot of the bed looking at me. They are 3.5 to 4 feet tall. They're like a translucent white. So they were not fully materialized. Large kind of oval heads, skinny neck, and much narrower shoulders and arms and torsos than would have been would it be a human proportion for that head. And of course I can't, they're at the foot of the bed. So I can only see a certain part. I assume they're bipedal, but I don't really know because the foot of the bed is in the way. Anyway, they're standing there looking at me. And there's a 5th one, there's 4 around the foot of the bed, and there's a 5th one kind of standing behind who is even less material. Like, I'm not even sure the fifth one was there, but anyway, they're looking at me and I'm looking at them, and I hear telepathically in my head, I hear this very sweet voice. Who are you? Okay. My mind doesn't go blank very often. My mind went blank. Because, like, again, remember, I'm not into this, extraterrestrial stuff. Like, it's real, but it's out there. It doesn't affect me. And so I just sat there and we're staring at each other. We're just staring at each other. And finally, and I mean, but okay, so I should say there's all this love coming from them to me, like waves of love. So there's no way to be afraid, right? Because who could be afraid of all that love? But I mean, like, okay, for most people who've not had this experience, like, you know how you can feel maybe your dog or your cat loving you? Like, maybe you can't, but I do, I feel that too. Anyway, and I'm not particularly a feeler, but there's these waves of love coming at me as my mind is blank. And eventually I think, I should ask them something. What do I ask them? And again, this had never occurred to me, so I was not really prepared. And the only thing I could think of was, where are you from? So I think to them, where are you from? And then very slowly in my mind, I hear Arcturus. And okay, so as I was not interested in science fiction, I was not interested in astronomy either. The only star I knew besides the sun was Sirius. And I don't even remember why I knew that. But anyway, so the next morning as I'm relaying this story to Kosta, I had to say, is that a place? And anyway, so after I hear this in my mind, we stared at each other a little longer, and then they just kind of faded out. So I tell this, and now I should also say, I am fairly sure today, not back then, but today, because of a similar thing that happened to two friends of ours, one who went up to Shasta and one who stayed home. Like, the husband went to Shasta, the wife stayed home, and she got visited in exactly the same way I did. So I think that they followed Kosta's thoughts to me. Like, he was probably having a good time thinking, God, I wish Hollis were here. And so they showed up and they're looking at me. Anyway, so the next morning.
Yeah, and I heard the story there, and I was just amazed, picked up my jaw from the floor and was real excited. And I told her, Arcturus, yeah, that is a place. I mean, it's a super, I think what they call a red hypergiant these days of a star. So you didn't make that up. And what I like to do is thank those Arcturians wherever they are, because what happened next was Hollis's comment after she tells me this whole amazing story was, now it's real. Now it's personal, right?
And next year I'm coming with you.
Yeah. And that's how she got into this. It took an actual physical visitation. I'd like to say that I created that, but no, we just were open. We were there in the right place and right time, and then it worked out well. So what I want to say is that was her like up close and personal story. And during that same week, I had one of my own that totally changed my life, and is the reason I'm talking with everyone right now, and the reason I've been doing ET Let's Talk for 14 years and going. And that is that one night after we had finished our group work, our Skywatch, our CE5, many people just got in their cars and drove home from the remote site in a forest, in a clearing, where we had been making the contact, and had a good night doing that. And there was Mount Shasta in the distance, always majestic at night, and just a great setting. But about 9 or 10 of us were still standing around talking in this clearing about what happened during the night. Someone tugged on my sleeve and pointed off to my right at the edge of the clearing where the trees begin. And I looked and had to kind of rub my eyes, but slowly, I'd say 6 to 8 feet away from me, materializing out of thin air, was a sphere that might have been 3 or 4 feet across, kind of just fading in. Didn't look solid, but it was clearly a sphere, round, opaque and kind of gray. And it was floating about a couple inches from the floor of the forest, not making a sound or any other kind of environmental noise or artifacts. It was just there. And no, it was not part of the foliage behind me. It wasn't a trick of the moon in the shadows. That thing was there, and all of us saw it. Adults, totally sane, totally sober. And for the next half hour, we talked about it and talked in hushed tones. I thought about reaching over to try to touch it, and then I thought better of that. Turns out later on, after this, after our event was over with it, someone actually had a sunburn in our group there. So I'm kind of glad I didn't get any closer. But what happened then was the most amazing thing for me, and that one of the members of our group shouted to the rest of us, "Hey, I just got a telepathic message from the beings inside of this. It might be, what we're seeing might actually be part of a larger craft that is not yet fully materialized, but what we're seeing was real there." And what they said to this gentleman was that they are scientists, and that they were here on Earth studying the human energy systems, our auras, our different energy bodies, etc. That was probably their PhD thesis. I don't know, they were doing field research or something. But I could relate to that. I mean, I didn't expect to hear that, but upon hearing it, I'm going, that makes sense. Human beings are explorers. Why wouldn't these other civilizations find us interesting in some way and be here? And then I noticed that the woman, and I'll call her Gloria, not her real name, standing next to me, was standing like this, perfectly straight with her arms out for the whole half hour. I was close enough to touch her, and seeing her standing there looked really weird. I thought, something's going on. I better just wait here in case she shows any signs of distress. And so during that half hour, she didn't move. Finally, at the end of the half hour, she did start to get a little wobbly, and I steadied her by the shoulders and asked her if she knew her name, knew where she was, and she responded affirmatively, but she said she was a little dazed and disoriented, but she was okay. And so I asked her, well, what happened? You've been standing there like something was going on. And she told me that as a really good psychic lady, and
she is, I met her later, and spent quite a lot of time with her.
Yeah, as a really good psychic, what was going on during that half hour that none of the rest of us knew until she told us the story, because it was all telepathic. One of these scientists apparently approached her and said to her, "May I merge with you to study your energy bodies?" Now, think about this. If you hear this voice, you're seeing this thing and floating there. Many people would start running away at that point with their hair on fire, heading for their car. But to Gloria's credit, she was totally cool. And what she did was she negotiated with the scientist and said, "Yeah, you can do that, but I have 3 conditions. And the first condition is that I remain cognizant of my surroundings. I don't want to be knocked out and unaware of who I am or where I am." And the scientist agreed to that. She said the second condition was that the being would leave when she told him or her to leave, and the being agreed to that condition as well. Her third condition was, "You don't touch the sex organs. I don't want any probing or messing around." And she was quite serious. And the being, I think, understood that and said, "Okay, we don't do that." And so for that half hour, she was being studied, by whatever means they were doing that with their psychic senses and whatnot. And at the point where she became a little wobbly was the point where she inwardly said to this being, "Okay, I'm done now, go." And it left. And I watched that small craft then slowly dematerialize back into thin air, just kind of a slow fade out, like it was a movie or something, and it was gone. And at that point, I realized I just had my own personal experience of something totally otherworldly that any of the physics that I know say should not have happened, but it happened for all of us, and it was so easy. I had this inspiration, like, this is what I want to do with my life, is teach other everyday people, because I'm nobody special, teach them what I've just learned, how to do this, because look what just happened. And, it really wasn't that difficult. So that's what changed my life. That was my up close and personal. And I decided to to start forming an online community. And that's where eventually etletstalk.com and the People's Disclosure Movement came from. I don't know if Hollis wants to add anything to that experience or not.
Well, not that experience. I wasn't there.
No, I think you were, but
Oh, well,
it's kind of in thought. Yeah.
That's
Well,
amazing.
what I'd like to say, Brendan, you might have a question or something.
Honestly, this is one of the topics that I love to just sit around a campfire and talk about all night. I will just kind of bring awareness to the fact that we've got about like 20 minutes before we move into the next event. So we'll make sure that we give all the information for people relative to ET Let's Talk and People's Disclosure Movement. But I'll pass it back to you because, again, I just being aware of short on time, what do people need to know about ET Let's Talk, or what else can you just kind of share with the audience, maybe even just about like CE5 that would just help them get started? Because I know even just on your website, which I really liked, the process of like having it in step 1, step 2, and step 3, and reminding people that the whole process of like step 1 is really about the journey inwards, and so much of the CE5 it really begins from the heart space, and it's not like this thing where it's just like, I'm going to go watch some UFOs, and you just kind of like go out there with your ego leading the way. It's great. Maybe that can inspire a lot of people, but I think as yourself and I mean, not to get into my story, but I love CE5 and I've had my own experience with CE5. It was definitely something where like it happened as a result of me just being in that place of just like gratitude and humility and without expectation, but just openness. So again, I know you have the couple steps on the website, which again is like looking inwards and then expanding outwards. So maybe if we can just talk a little bit to educate people who may not be entirely familiar with CE5, because I think even though it's something you've been familiar with, there's still people who are just learning about it, and any other information, and then about ET Let's Talk and People's Disclosure Movement, and then we'll see where we are time-wise after that. And thank you again for sharing your stories. I love listening.
And thank you for being the timekeeper, because
Yes.
yeah, like I said, we have stories. We could go on all night with all the lore, and that's just ours. Never mind everyone else that we know that has done even greater things. But I will say etletstalk.com, it's free membership. There's lots of information there. As Brendan mentioned, the 7 steps to make your own contact. It's all about your intention, your goodwill, your open, loving heart and mind. And any fear or negativity or prove it to me kind of attitude will not, I think, and we've seen it, will dampen any experience you have. This is all about creating high vibrations of love that is welcoming to our cosmic visitors. They're able to detect that. They get our signatures, they get our location. So you can come and join as a free member. You become part of the community. You'll be receiving announcements about our community global events where we visually join with each other once a month. And we've done that for more than 10 years, so that we've built a group field around the earth now that is basically saying, welcome, welcome. And it's a high vibrational field, and we're attracting the same kind of thing to ourselves. Now, there's many modalities to make this kind of contact for people who are new to this. And this is what Hollis will teach.
Right. So each of us has our own unique set of psychic abilities, and the psychic abilities exist one for each of the physical senses, right? So for feeling, I'm going to do these in the order of most to least common. So for feeling, there's clairsentience. For seeing, there's clairvoyance. For hearing, there's clairaudience. For smell, there's clairolfaction. And for taste, clairgustation. Those are pretty rare, but they definitely happen. And then there's the real sixth sense that nobody wants to talk about, which is telepathy. And each person has his or her own unique set of abilities. So like, there are a lot of people who are feelers, right? And so they get clairsentient stuff, right? They feel things from other people. They, called proprioception, like that whole gut feel thing. Well, you can get good information that way. I don't get a darn thing. Like what I learned for myself, my feeling is my fear, and it's useless. Like people say, well, what do you feel? Yeah, you don't want to know what I feel. But I see things and I hear things. And so among other things, and it's a little more complicated than I can go into here, they have many years ago, some group of star visitors, and I don't know who they are, showed me how they travel. It's connected consciousness, and they showed me kind of how they do that. And they are teaching me how we can connect ourselves and reach out in that way. Like we won't go travel, at least not yet. At least they haven't taught me that part yet. But they have taught us how to connect really well. And I have a group, long story, who's met regularly for a few years now over the internet, and with the intention of doing healing. And those people, we've created a structure. It doesn't travel, but at least we've made a structure on the airplane. So I know this stuff works. And then what happens when you create a good group field, it makes it much stronger, and it attracts more beings, more, more craft, and then all kinds of things happen. And some of them happen on the inner planes, and some of things happen, that's the whole lights in the sky thing. And we've had all kinds of experiences, from clouds to ships showing up to, all kinds of things. And then there are the things where there are beings that you can literally feel on the ground with you. And I can remember a couple different times when, like, you can feel, you can feel with your hands, but it's not a physical touch, but you can feel an energy field with your hands. And a whole bunch of us, 6 or 7 of us, will feel this, or maybe 10 will feel a being there. We can all, run our hands through that person's field or whatever it is. So, these things happen.
And it's possible for many people, and that's what Hollis teaches, is for every person to discover their own modality or modalities that work for them, because no two of us are alike in that way. And that's what brings success. So why are we doing all this? Well, the lights in the sky are important because the physical sight that we all have is the easiest way for most of us to see something. All of us may experience it. Yeah, all of us may not be clairaudient or this or that, but most of us have physical sight, and we can share that and agree that we've made contact. So that's why the lights in the sky are important, but it's also important to form relationships. Telepathy is what Hollis mentioned, and other people have formed relationships where they can speak with star beings who call themselves star families, our star family. What I want to do now is just go into the bigger picture of the People's Disclosure Movement. Okay, so we're out here by our thousands for years, creating this group field. We've been making contact successfully, capturing it on video, getting stories and sharing with each other, and really celebrating the community we have. And then you go, well, what's all that about? What's the next step? What's the next important thing? What we've come to understand from our star friends is that they've asked us to form as many groups as possible in as many places as possible, as quickly as possible. They asked us to start this in 2010, when we really started building groups. And yes, we communicated with them. And I asked, well, what is the point? And they said, someday a tipping point will be reached when so many people have seen us around the world that no government can ever again cover up our presence. So what I'm trying to say to your audience right now is the government and those who for 70-ish years have covered this up, pay no attention to that anymore. They own the past in a way. And it wasn't, a lot of it leaked out, so it wasn't really a great job, but it was enough of a job to make us look like we're crazy, and we're not. But they own the past, and the People's Disclosure Movement is about, like what Hollis was saying, learning how to make our own contact, teaching someone else. It's a grassroots movement. It has, by my count, and this is conservative because I don't see and know everything, maybe about 650,000 people in more than 100 countries who are practicing this contact, interested in it, learning, digging deeper, and getting other people involved. That's the People's Disclosure Movement. I like to say that it's us taking our power back from the authorities that we had given them. So for those people who are maybe waiting for disclosure from the government, and I know this is a big thing in the UFO field, but why don't you turn your energies, just as a suggestion, into learning how to make your own contact? And you'll find that when you have the kind of experience that we've had and hundreds and thousands of others have had, that you go from being a believer in this stuff into being a knower, and you've just disclosed. And when you've done that, and thousands of your friends have done that, that's a people's disclosure, and you've done an end around all the government, all the officials, and everything else. I mean, many of us would like an announcement to be made by a premier, a president, a prime minister, something like, hey, You all were right all along. We were messing with you. We were covering it up. And they may fake it in some way. They may just drip it. Again, I'm saying let's use our energy to do our people's disclosure. My star friends have told me that in 2019, 2 years ago almost, we achieved that people's disclosure, where the tipping point that they talked about in 2010 did occur. Our CE5 movement now, they say, is like a snowball rolling downhill, can't be stopped. It is, I hate to use the word viral because that is such a horrible word lately, but think of it in a good way. Our movement really is viral, and there are more people doing this than I'm aware of, than many other people are aware of, because we now have networks within networks within networks making contact. That's the People's Disclosure Movement. It's the most empowering thing that I can leave all of you with, as a place to spend your time and take back your power and become the knower instead of the believer.
And it's our present, it's our future, right? We create that.
Yeah, we what we focus on, we create, and the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so this People's Disclosure Movement is about us rejoining our cosmic family, and they're waiting, and they're asking to mentor us. They have told us that the prime directive has been removed from them. They are allowed to join in our affairs if they are asked, requested, and to help us more than they were ever before. They see our potential in being able to evolve into like a golden age of free energy, peace on earth, where everyone's fed, everyone's clothed. You know, and it sounds like the most idealistic kind of stuff, but you know, if you don't reach for it and try to build it, it ain't gonna happen. So we're all about doing that with the People's Disclosure Movement, and we have their help. They are actively looking to come among us. Why don't they? There are many reasons, but the People's Love Alliance is addressing that. The People's Love Alliance is about humans learning to make contact with each other and get along. Because imagine if you're a star visitor here and you're watching the locals down there, us humans, killing each other for the difference in the color of our skin. How are we going to accept them?
Well, also, I mean, the last presentation, right? The Her Talks were talking about frequencies and, you know, harmonies. And okay, what we're doing is we're creating a harmonious culture, which can attract, you know, more contact with other civilizations that have already achieved that harmony that would like to help.
And that's the People's Love Alliance, us creating the harmony among ourselves. We may think that it's just ourselves and 10 of our friends who want peace on earth, but let me tell you, I'm going to throw some fast statistics. After I've done some research on the internet, there are many groups that will not get time on the evening news because the mass media likes to lead with, if it bleeds, it leads with fear and all that. These groups and these numbers of people are like all of us who need to know about each other. There are 69 million members of an organization called avaz.org, AVAAZ.org, across every country of the planet, people helping people with all kinds of campaigns that are building a better world, 69 million. And you can see it on their website. They have an incredible community and a lot of campaigns. There's also the something called the New Group of World Servers and the Men and Women of Goodwill, 100 million members who are using goodwill, which is love in action, with everyday acts of kindness that you will never see, or will rarely see really elevated in mass media. But in our aggregate, 100 million people who have opened their hearts to some extent and are helping their neighbors and doing the projects that are building a new world are having an effect. And you just have to understand that this is a reason for hope and inspiration, that we're not really just meandering and watching the world fall apart on mass media, but in between those airwaves are all these other people really building the new world. There's also 135 million members in what is called the cultural creatives in the US and in Europe. I don't have any numbers for Asia. Again, people who have values, cultural creatives, that are sustainable values, spiritual, in the broadest sense of the word, life affirming, ecologically affirming values that are working to build a better world. 135 million of those. And also Paul Hawken of Smith & Hawken wrote a book called Blessed Unrest, How 50 Million People Are Changing the World, where he talks about 2 million non-governmental organizations spread across the planet in all areas with millions of members there whose missions are to, say, build a well in the village or provide solar power over here or whatever NGOs do, and they're myriad types of them, but they're all for well-being and for building better societies and a better world. Like I said, 2 million of those organizations that Paul Hawken identified. So I will leave you with that. Lots of big numbers, and it's hard to wrap your mind around it, but what I ask people is just to realize we're not alone in the stars. We know that. We're also not alone on Earth. We do have each other, and love will find a way. That's why it's the People's Love Alliance. And I urge people to look forward in the future. Don't let the fear that's coming at us now with drip, drip, drip of disclosure and fake alien hoaxes and invasions and stuff, don't let that fear neutralize your power. Your power is to look forward in love and create the world you want, instead of looking back in fear on your knees and letting someone else control you, no matter who it is, government or otherwise. So that's what I want to leave people with is there's hope. These movements are really giving it to us.
Absolutely.
ETLetsTalk.com.
ETLetsTalk.com, definitely. And for those of you who are just looking for a little bit more instructions on CE5 protocols, again, there is some more information there. They've broken it down into steps. And honestly, I wish we could just kind of like fold time in on itself and keep this talk going for another hour, but we're going to keep on schedule. And Kosta and Hollis, I'd love to just kind of continue connecting with you and you know, a lot of the work that you're doing. Again, I love that Neil paired us up for this, because it's just like we're kind of doing the same thing in a lot of ways, where so much of what I'm doing as well, it's about like shifting consciousness through acts of kindness and compassion, but at the same time, it is about expanding it out into the bigger cosmic lineage and the family. And we just got a few more minutes here, and again, you know, just kind of like really without. We don't really have a lot of time to really be able to get into the whole CE5 protocol. But again, for those of you who are interested, you know, like start finding the other people who are interested in this concept. And then what you can do, it's not even something that's like super, super complicated. You know, it's just about like finding people, setting that intention, and then like, again, just kind of bringing yourself into the heart space, meditation, going out there. And there's different tools and techniques, but again, opening up people to the idea that the contact isn't even something that appears through lights in the sky. It's also taking place through dream time. You know, it's taking place through meditation. A lot of people, they somehow they haven't been told this explicitly. So, you know, just even setting an intention before going to bed. And again, I'm just like, it's like, oh, we got 2 minutes, but we're going to wrap it up here, and I'll pass it back to you in a second. For me, the thing that's so powerful is really being able to feel in our heart, like the love that these beings have for us. And that's where you've already said this, we can think of them literally as relatives. A term that I've really, you know, when me and my girlfriend, before we had a big sighting, we were driving up north, and the term that I started using, it wasn't ETs, because I'm like, oh, ETs and UFOs. I'm like, I understand what it means, but I'm like, maybe there's another term. And then I started calling them OUs, which for me means other us's. And for me, that really resonated. So I'm like, oh, let's go, like, you know, make contact with some OUs, and be that the craft or be that the dream encounter. But maybe let's just finish here on one real quick point with 1 minute left, on just kind of like summarize for us, like, who are these beings? And I know there's a big spectrum, but who are they relative to us, and the relationship they share with us, and how as we grow, they grow alongside of us. And there's like a karma between the two of us. So
yeah, so they have said early on, they said, do not think of us as gods in our communications. They said, think of us as family. We are elder brothers, sisters, and cousins. And you can get into the debate about negative versus positive ETs. I don't go there. We deal with love and with high vibrations. If there are negative ones, we're not contacting them. They're leaving us alone. We are totally immersed with the many scores of civilizations that are here. We have seen their craft. We've communicated with them. They want to walk among us. Many of them already are, because they look, some look very much like humans. You cannot distinguish the difference for example. So they're already blending with us and waiting for us to kind of come along and join them in the harmony that they have found. Syrians, Pleiadians, Arcturians, lots of other places. I don't know if Hollis wants to add to that. You met the Arcturians, or at least one race
group. There might be
yeah.
many. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and there are beings that you just meet on the inner planes. They can be higher beings, and they may be from this planet, and maybe not.
That's right.
You know, I don't know where they're all from, but I know that the information they give me is pretty reliable.
Very
And
powerful.
I want to emphasize, we are not special people.
No.
We are not to be looked at as great exalted leaders or cult leaders or anything. We're just people who had an amazing experience and wanted to teach others how to do it and let them become their own facilitators and leaders of groups. So come to the website, etletstalk.com. Please join the People's Disclosure Movement, the People's Love Alliance.
And one of the cool things about etletstalk.com is you might find somebody down the street who's interested in what you're doing and will go out under the stars with you, because we have had that happen a few times. Like there was somebody literally walking distance away from somebody who felt so alone. And she went on the website and God, there was somebody literally less than a mile away. That
does happen. We're everywhere.
Yes, we are everywhere.
Absolutely beautiful. And just to conclude it here again, the websites have been mentioned, ET-Talk, that's etletstalk.com. And I'll just kind of say again, kind of from like my own passion with this study, it's like for those of us tuned in right now, if you feel passionate, if you feel called to this, first of all, know that there are experiences within your timeline that are there for you. Maybe you haven't had them yet, but they are there for you. Feel them within your heart. And then the other thing that's really powerful, it's like if you really resonate with this, you're already an ambassador. Like you're probably like more connected to them than you realize. Cause I think a lot of us came here to be ambassadors of this wisdom. And we may be, again, like there's much more mystery to kind of unravel here, but just being open to that relationship. And that's what it is. It's developing a relationship, and we're learning and they're learning, and it's a lot more still ahead of us. So very, very, very exciting times. Thank you so much, Kosta. Thank you so much, Hollis. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited for more people to be able to connect with you, and I look forward to being able to continue this conversation in whatever format beyond.
Anytime.
Sounds really good.
Thank you so much.